Matsuribayashi is definitely one of Higurashi's best chapters. It's not only got a crazy main story, but it has a ton of mini stories called Fragments too. They may be short, but that definitely doesn't mean they aren't important. Some reveal nearly everything about the true mystery behind Higurashi, whereas others provide tons of context behind the events leading to 1983. I'm Jedharend, and today my goal, not to connect the fragments, but to rank them from worst to best. This is entirely from a reader's perspective. Obviously the story's quality will be taken into account, but more importantly, as a reader, how I enjoyed them. So let's get into this. At the bottom of the list, I'm going to put all the tiny fragments of each chapter. These provide a little evaluation on how and why the chapter's events contributed to the goal of defeating Rule X, Y, and Z so that a safe June 1983 can be reached. They're definitely thought-provoking, and they add a ton to the almost godly atmosphere the fragments give, but they have too little content to be higher. Next, our first full fragment, the dam construction operation withdrawal. The clinic's team talk about how the dam construction project threatens the research and how Tokyo are going to somehow resolve this massive problem. It's interesting, don't get me wrong, but it's nothing much more than casual conversation. Number 43, Jiro Tomitake. We learn a little bit about Tomitake and Takano here, as well as his past and his interest in cameras. It's fun and pleasant, and despite pouring with rain outside, a very relaxing and cozy atmosphere is created, but it doesn't really have much to it. Number 42, June 1983. This fragment contains details of who can break Rule X, Y, and Z, the many butterfly effects of each timeline, and who is essential for defeating Takano in order to overcome June 1983. I like this supernatural element of Higurashi. The metaphorical game board the fragment set up adds a really nice and mysterious layer of depth to the goal of overcoming June 1983. The story gave quite a sense of reward as well. The result of all of the fragments being read finally shows itself here, when we learn about how everything we've read is going to be the basis of this perfect ending. Number 41, 1, 2, 3, 4. We learn some more about Takano in a conversation with her and Tomitake here. Takano confessing her connection to her grandfather to Tomitake here is really quite surprising, and how she believes folklore is key to discovering more about the syndrome provides some really quite essential info in her approach to research too. It's interesting, and it definitely provides a nice feeling of unease at the end when we see how serious Takano is about not having this information spread. Number 40, a routine inspection. After a successful Hinamizawa Syndrome presentation, Takano has a celebratory conversation with Koizumi. C103 has been an insanely influential drug to the researcher's development. It really filled me with hope, seeing the possibilities of getting a higher budget increasing more and more. Number 39, Rena Ryugu. She feels she can finally rid herself of all the spiritual sin and dirt she accumulated in the past. Knowing she's finally experiencing the happiness she deserves after her severely awful past will never fail to put a smile on my face. This fragment aces the happy mood brought on by this new beginning. Number 38, Arakori and Yagochi. The introduction to the emergency manual's procedures for the worst case scenario is in this fragment. I've always found the Queen Carrier related topics and what overall helps to cause the gas disaster to definitely be one of the more interesting things we learn about the research. So yeah, I enjoyed this fragment. The research is also being taken seriously for one of the first times ever here, and seeing a happiness never experienced before by Takano really well illustrates the value she's placed into this research. Number 37, H170. Here we learn about Ilya's determination to cure Satoko with the C103 medicine, and his desperation to keep her off the dissection table. We also learn a little bit about H170 here, which is the first military use of this drug. Everything in this fragment is in Takano's perspective, so even though this fragment doesn't have very much, it's still interesting to see how the opinions of the research differ from her and Irie. Number 36, Death of Satoshi's aunt. Oishi's opinions on what truly happened on the 4th year of mysterious deaths can be found here. It's quite interesting to see his thoughts, especially his beliefs about Satoshi being set up by the 3 families. His sentiment from the dam construction manager's death also provides a really strong emotional connection to the case and a feeling of dependence to solve it and avenge him. It was nice to see Oishi's misinterpretations of these events and why he actually thought these things. Number 35, New Wind. This conversation between Mion and Oryo highlights the good Oryo, out of all people, surprisingly believes newcomers bring to Hinamizawa. The village will not move on from the effects of the dam conflict, for example the constant bullying of the Hojo's, without new people bringing fresh air into the village. The pleasant conversation, the analogy, it was all done really well. It definitely made me realise how different Oryo's true personality was to the one she puts on show to the villagers. Number 34, Satoshi Hojo's fragment is next, and it is damn sad. we have an insight into the hardship of Satoshi's younger life, when Satoko refuses to leave her hideout to go to a family dinner. It is genuinely soul-crushing that the bad father Satoko had in the past prevent them from having any meaningful family relationship at all. Satoshi is the only one she can rely on. I am actually annoyed this fragment didn't go to number 34. At number 33, we have flags from kids' meals. Seeing how ridiculously inhumane Takano was treated at the orphanage makes a story like this deserved. Sure, it breaks nearly every single rule of what should and shouldn't be able to happen within the events of the fragments, but does that matter? Because of this, a future beginning and most likely ending in total misery is completely prevented. Seeing Miyoko not losing her parents, getting the final flag she wanted to collect, it was really quite sweet. Number 32, disappointment. Takano's really quite upset here due to having just lost Koizumi, and she's dissatisfied because of how little time she has left with the research. It's good that we get this from Tomitake's point of view. We get more of an insight into his thoughts and how Takano's dress affects the way she acts to the people she likes. Number 31, preview of Lots for Sale. Keiichi's dad, who may or may not draw hentai, is lost in an unknown village and he meets Rika and Hanyu on his travels. We have a pretty weird, I suppose sweet conversation with them. What makes this fragment stand out for me, however, is his feelings of positivity towards Hinamizawa. It's perfect for Keiichi to restart his life in. Their sad regrets for not being good enough parents to help Keiichi when being affected the worst by his schoolwork stood out just as much too. Number 30, a roller for one. Koizumi, the last foundation of Tokyo's old generation who was funding the Hinamizawa Syndrome research, has died. As a result, the new generation's board of directors declared the research to be finished within the next 3 years. I especially like that this awful defeat still has an ounce of hope. It may still be possible to eradicate this disease in secret with enough time and funding from Tokyo. Also, making this Takano's perspective was a brilliant move if you ask me. I don't usually find political meetings to be the most interesting things in Higurashi, but the topic of this one was really quite intriguing, I didn't care at all. Number 29, formation of a club. Everyone's concerned about Satoko, especially Mion. She really wants to help her, but feels that being in the Sonozaki family is limiting her from gaining Satoko's trust. Satoshi really wants to change this though, and it's interesting to see how their concerns about Satoko eventually lead to the making of the club, an environment she can constantly enjoy herself in. The club's definitely one of Higurashi's most significant parts. It's such a relief it has an interesting backstory. Number 28, Keiichi Mayabara. Keiichi can finally restart his life and put the past behind him, and moves into the new school with a really positive attitude. He doesn't need to study much anymore, the things that ruined his life beforehand. The bigger focus is on learning life skills and how to enjoy yourself. It's fun to see Keiichi's first conversation with Rika and Hanyu here. You can tell from the start that he's going to fit in right away, and that he's going to get pranked by Satoko, but we don't go there. Number 27, Kyosuke Irie. We go back to one of the researchers' earliest stages and learn about the undesirable way their studies could be advanced. They'd have to dissect an actual human being alive. Irie, while having a brilliantly done internal conflict on how ridiculously wrong and unethical this is talking to Takano, the crazy one willing to do it without batting an eyelid. These differences between the researchers adds a lot more fire to the debate Irie has, and provides a really nice hint on the struggles these differences will make in the future. Number 26, Mion Sonozaki. Rika collects a watermelon from the Sonozaki house, and on the way home with Mion, they talk about their concerns towards Satoko. No matter how bad of a time she and her brother are having, they're always going to receive grief from people around the village for simply being a member of a family they despised. It's really sad seeing how genuinely defeated Mion feels. No matter what she does, her changing the views of every single villager would be impossible. Number 25, Hojo siblings. Irie's really noticing how much Satoko's sadness is affecting Satoshi. Satoshi being asked to join the baseball team may have reduced his stress, but it also meant that Satoko was on her own with her parents. This story is painful, but the fact it all could have been prevented if Irie noticed Satoko's problems earlier made it even worse for me. Number 24, Depression of a Shinto Priest. Here we get an insight to how mental the Onigafuchi Guardians are, and how unpleasantly these people badmouth and bully the Hojo family. When I read this chapter, I felt genuine anger, which made me respect Rika's dad all the more for trying to stand up to it. This conflict is so unpleasant that the second the Guardian's ideals are even close to being defied by Rika's dad, within a flash it's like he's become a threat to everyone, no matter how much importance he bears in the village. Number 23, mysterious death of the Furude couple. This fragment sees the very sudden death of Rika's dad from the perspective of Oishi. He's taken to the clinic by Irie. Oishi tries to follow him by car, thinking it'd be quicker than running, but is soon proven wrong when he realises how much traffic there is. This oversight meant he may have missed out on a vital truth behind Rika's parents' death. It was also really quite fun to compare Oishi's theories of the events to the genuine truth that we now knew. It's quite funny, the Matsudogs are so secretive that you can't even begin to come close to a truth that's rational behind this crime. Number 22, a local explanatory meeting. Hanyu is watching the infuriated Onigafuchi Guardians take out all of their anger on the government in a protest. However, the family supporting the dam construction side with Satoko's dad once he stands up for them, and a heated argument occurs. Seeing the brutal energy of this argument combined with Hanyu's helplessness makes it a very powerful story that is impossible to prevent. Number 21, a notice of a leave of absence. Satoshi leaves the baseball team and takes up a part-time job instead so that he can make enough money to buy a giant teddy for Satoko's upcoming birthday. Her life is getting worse and worse, she needs something that can make her happy. Irie also stupidly lends him a bat so that he can quote-unquote practice at home. Well, if you call killing your art baseball practice, then I suppose he was telling the truth? When Irie realised Satoshi's true intentions with that bat, nothing could be taken back. I really like the views of Irie here. Despite Satoshi's actions being extremely kind here, Irie thinks a part-time job is really bad for him due to how already stressful his daily life is, especially due to not being able to get much sleep. He cannot say this to him though, as he's worried he'll lose Satoshi's trust. Overall, the tricky situation in this fragment is just painful to read. Number 20, suffering of a big brother. Satoshi, a loving brother, is so worried about her younger sister, and Irie definitely shares those worries too. Despite this though, Irie knows that Satoko's been planned to be dissected at this time. He's got to give totally false hopes to Satoshi about how Satoko's going to get better. Irie's pain in this situation combined with hearing how terrible home life is for Satoshi makes this story so unpleasant. Number 19, Rika Furude. We're shown how much the villagers are assholes to the Hojo's here from the point of the worried friend Rika. The scene where Satoko, a kid who's done nothing wrong who's being ignored by the shop owner, drops her money without anybody helping her pick it up is just infuriating to read. This fragment builds up so much sympathy for not only Satoko, but Rika too. She may not be suffering this herself, but her friend is, so of course it's still as bad. Number 18, an accident at the Shirakawa Park. Oishi is desperate to question Satoko about the details that don't quite add up in her parents' death. He can't know this due to the researcher's secrecy, but if he does question Satoko, her level 5 symptoms are going to reawaken and she will be destroyed. Of course, Irie must prevent this from happening at all costs, even if he is obstructing an investigation. Believe it or not actually, Irie didn't know the truth of what happened before the investigation. When he discovers what has genuinely happened, oh my god, it's made to be as sad as it can be, so this story was not only really damn thought-provoking, but very emotional too. Number 17, footsteps in the 4th year. The paranoia of Satoshi is developing so much due to his awful home life, increasing the syndrome's intensity. Satoshi is unbelievably strong to be able to help Satoko while dealing with the pain the abuse brings him at the same time, but it's becoming harder and harder for him to cope. Seeing this defeat bring on another voice in his head demanding him to kill Satoko because of how hard she makes his life did a great job at making me feel as uneasy as I possibly could. I was so worried about what may happen to Satoko, but more importantly Satoshi himself if this other side of him took control. Number 16, requesting assistance from a queen. A Furude family meeting about Hinamizawa Syndrome and Rika's involvement as the queen carrier happens here. Rika is never going to hesitate to offer her body up to the research because of how much it will help Satoko, and her dad's just going to do whatever she wants. Her mother on the other hand is not accepting it at all. Her conflicting views and suspicion of handing Rika over to something as shady as this adds so much more to the plot and so much more distrust and unease as well. Number 15, First Sacrifice. The main murderer of the dam construction manager has been abducted by the mountain dogs with the intent of dissection. Unlike Takano, Irie actually responds like a human being to this. He feels really hesitant to do it. He may have done lobotomies before, but he could at least justify those with the fact it was done with the aim of curing someone. This, however, is going to achieve nothing moral at all. They may have advanced on the research, but it's at the expense of an individual's life. It's really interesting how Irie's position as a researcher really changes the way he views and debates this situation. Number 14, Second Sacrifice. It's been revealed that Satoko has level 5 Hinamizawa Syndrome symptoms, and just like that, she's become the perfect test subject for a dissection. Irie has a ridiculous amount of doubt and guilt about dissecting Satoko, especially due to knowing Satoshi and how much he cares about her. There's no cure for the syndrome at this moment too. Should Irie let her go out of the clinic, become deranged and kill people? Or should he just end it now? I bloody love this dilemma, it's just impossible. Both outcomes are as bad as each other. Number 13, C103 Dose Experiment. Satoko's bedbound in the clinic. Irie would do anything for her not to be dissected. They're developing medicine that could calm the syndrome down, C103, but it's too risky to give her because of it being new and, more importantly, untested. This is a time of desperation. She will die without medication. There's a massive debate over whether he should give it to her or not. I really liked how the mysteriously mature Rika actually helped him come to a conclusion. And the trust Irie has from Rika just because of him actually caring about human lives is really quite a heartwarming moment. Number 12, Satoko Hojo. If there is one thing Higurashi never fails to do, it is making a backstory as painful and undeserved as possible. Satoko talking about her family conflicts and how her fathers never failed to treat her poorly before divorcing with her mum genuinely hurts. You know what also hurts? The fact her new father is trying so hard to develop their relationship, and yet Satoko, because of how much of a better parent her dad has suddenly become, can only see it as a plot to erase her from their lives. It's really well written and it hits a lot. Number 11, Distrust of the Mother of a Queen. Rika's mum has a ton of suspicion to the Institute, especially after Rika got a fever from what she thinks is the research, and refuses to let Rika's body be donated any longer. It's really quite something seeing Irie trying to ease her concerns, but totally failing compared to Takano, who attacks her like a damn predator would with their prey. She is brutal. Another factor that contributes to her suspicion is because of its objective changing. Originally, it was to find a cure to save Satoko, but now that she's saved, it's to refine the cure for the syndrome, discover all of its mysteries, and make military weapons from it, but obviously she can't know that. Even after Satoko's been saved, they're still continuing their research, and she really thinks they're being taken advantage of. Overall, everything is done very well here, and a massive threat is posed to the future of the research. Oh boy, here we go, the last 10 fragments. Number 10, research is going well. Irie needs Rika's dad's consent before collecting Rika's cerebrospinal fluid for the research, and we're informed about the possible risks to Rika this presents. However, Takano thinks consent isn't really necessary here. They already have consent for the research being done to Rika, so they could just make this big move without anything being said, but that's unethical and will look awful on them if anything happens to her. I absolutely love how much of an arsehole Takano is to Irie when arguing her view, and Irie taking this so amazingly done scolding personally makes the situation all the more tricky. It's a really well done argument. Number 9, Deja Vu. Takano must convince the new board of directors at Tokyo not to cut her funding for the research. The people she's talking to may be as informal and unprofessional as it gets, but they are damn important. She can't mess this up. Despite doing well though, they are not convinced at all. They ridicule and trample over her research once she's gone. This, combined with the ridiculously sad music, makes us truly see how emotional Takano is and how personally she takes this. Seeing her going into the meeting room unannounced, begging on her knees for the congressmen to get their feet off the research documents makes it feel like she has literally travelled back in time to when an event basically identical to this happened to her grandfather. This story also gave me very conflicted emotions. Do I feel bad for Takano because the only good part of her horrible childhood is being taken away brutally? Or do I feel it's deserved because she's literally murdered people in the name of research? Number 8, the third sacrifice. Rika's mum has convinced her dad to stop the research happening to Rika, so basically, they've both got to die. We can really see Takuno's selfishness lead into utter cruelty here. How she orders the mountain dogs to kill somebody's parents is absolutely disgusting. And what's even worse is she views Rika as a guinea pig, not even as a human being. She is devoid of empathy. This is the easy way out of the problem for Takuno, and was also an easy way for me to have complete detest to her. Number 7, the fourth sacrifice. This fragment is painful and it is done brilliantly. The first stab in the back we have is when Satoshi has finally earned enough money to buy Satoko's teddy. He's killed her aunt and her uncle has fled, but that does not mean everything's over for their sadness, because when Irie drives home, we discover that he has level 5 symptons. This discovery is really surprising. It's very unpleasant to read, especially because of how sudden his emotions changed. I also like that this story doesn't explain everything. It may explain Satoshi's disappearance, but it doesn't explain anything about why he proceeds to be kept in the clinic for nearly a year. They already have medicine that may have cured him, so I was thinking that Takuno dissected him without Irie's permission. Number 6, a murder with a dismembered body. The Onigashiki Guardians may be almighty and heroic, but if they saw events like these that their protests caused, let's just say I don't think they would be so proud. The damn construction manager's definitely got a high level of the syndrome after the constant stress his job has given him. He went as far as dangerously assaulting his workers for drinking on the job, and they accidentally killed him in self-defense. The leader of this crime is insane though. He totally has the syndrome, so it does not end there. He forces everybody to dismember the damn construction manager and hide his body parts in various locations to prevent getting caught. Only the crime being shown here was really quite good. There's still a mystery of what the hell happened to the main murderer, the one who disappeared. Overall, if there's one thing Yukishi never fails to excel at, it's providing the most horrific read in a severely gory situation. He aces it here. Number 5, leftover fragments. This fragment shows us Akasaka's ridiculous potential for helping everybody break through 1983, when we learn about just how skilled he is at his job. He can stop criminals who are good enough to get classified government information. Like, they're a minor inconvenience. I must admit, in the raid, him completely destroying the criminals does suffer from a little bit of exaggeration in some parts, but overall, it was so adventurous. Why Akasaka became so strong in the first place has some very sympathetic elements to his character as well. He mostly uses gathering strength and punching it all out as a means of disciplining his mind in order to cope with Yukie's death and his inability to save Rika. He longs to turn back to his life's turning points though, and while doing so, the very supernatural conversation with Hanyu begins. It's funny how this conversation changes literally nothing for Akasaka in this story, and yet it's going to have such a big effect on the future events we read, as this conversation increases the chances of him coming to Hinamizawa. The element of mystery from a godly setting unknown to humanity, contrasting with the completely human emotion Akasaka feels, makes this moment feel all the more magical, and overall, it makes the end of a really good fragment. Number 4, an invitation to the end. Everything Takuno's research could possibly achieve will end soon. It's like the research had a direct attack on not only her, but her grandfather too. She can't bear the thought that she's going to have to make his work look like it's never even existed within the next 3 years. The bloody evil politician Nomura uses this for her advantage as much as possible though, as she subtly manipulates Takuno at her weakest and most irrational point. Nomura wants to gain Takuno's cooperation, so of course she lies about being a patron who's going to allow her to continue researching independently. Listening to Nomura was undeniably her worst ever mistake, as due to it, a new objective has been put into her head: revenge. Revenge to all those who have defied her grandfather's research. Her emotional changes and emotion in general is handled damn brilliantly here. What's even cooler to me is that it's obvious Takuno is being manipulated after a while, and yet she still can't see it. It adds so much unease. Obviously, this fragment is a lot longer than the other one, so it's going to be a lot higher naturally, but it deserves this place. It's a damn good story. Number 3, the old guy. As a person who doesn't know crap about history, this story taught me a lot about the effect World War II had on Japan. The ties this fragment had with just as interesting history was good enough. So after that, if you then chuck an immaculate story on top of it, of course it's going to hit deep. We see the tragedy Oishi, like so many others in the war, had of losing a relative, in this case his father, and the progression of this grief. More importantly though, we see Oishi's police duties during the chronic food shortages Japan had after the war. How ethical these arrests are is really debatable though. Lots of families would have bought black market rice, but if they didn't, they would literally die of starvation. There was just that little food in Japan at the time. As a policeman, he had to make these arrests, no matter how right or wrong. He gets some bad consequences for obeying his duty, however, when he's taught a tough lesson from the damn construction manager. This is because he defied these people of their hard-earned foods, and therefore their lives, when arresting them and taking their food. The resemblance of Oishi's father he saw in him caused this message to really sink in and hit emotionally, and this is reflected in the obligation he feels towards solving the truth behind his death. Overall, this was top quality. It gave such an informative and tragic read. Number 2, ED's background. Like the name of the fragment suggests, a short summary of the events in ED's life that led to him becoming a doctor is found here, and it is damn good. Reading about the constant success as well as how happy his parents were because of his efforts made me feel so proud of the guy. However, all of these happy feelings are instantly converted into sadness when learning of the misfortune behind his motivation to study neurology. After a really bad work-related accident, his father gets brain damage and completely changes to an abusive monster. So much so that his mother has to flee from him. This adds a ton of weight to why he began his career in neurology, and it did a great job of making EDS so much more of a respectable, but also sympathetic character. Right guys, time for the number 1 fragment. This one is so good that it completely dethrones anything else. A red capsule. Now this has got to be one of the most disturbing things I have ever read. Nena's in her worst ever mental state here. She's being drowned by pharmaceuticals so much so that she is basically a living zombie. She'll barely be conscious most of the time and obviously won't be in the state to move. No matter what she does, somebody's always going to find her and force those evil pills down her throat. We see the genuinely heartbreaking, but also, let's be honest, deserved hatred Nena has to her mother for running off with another man, and how she blames herself for it entirely. How it ruined her dad too is tragic. He's unable to be happy and has even taken his anger out on Nena before. Nena's self-hatred combined with bad Hinamizawa Syndrome leads her to thinking the inside of her body is filthy. She even has paranoia of maggots crawling inside it. This story's body horror is done so well too, but as a result of that, let's just say I find it hard to keep the contents of my stomach in my body while trying not to cry. She mutilates herself so much that if she isn't saved, she will die. But luckily, Oyashiro-sama then appears and Nena finally notices the apologies that she's been hearing for so long. Such an ethereal and yet tragic atmosphere is presented here, but at least Nena is saved. This is because she finally knows that there is somebody to put the blame of the incident onto. She does not have to take it out on herself. I bloody love this fragment. It is the closest a fragment in Higurashi could be to being perfect. And that, my friends, is every single Higurashi fragment ranked! I'm really happy I did this. It really let me experience a strong set of Higurashi stories again. Now that I think about it, these fragments are some of the most crucial elements of Higurashi's plot. Nearly every mystery is revealed. Anyway, really hope you enjoyed this ranking. Definitely leave a comment. I'd love to see your thoughts on the fragments and how they compare. And yeah, that's everything wrapped up, so I will see you in the next video. Bye guys!